Hello, and thank you for logging on to watch the LSS Study Skills Workshop on Critical Thinking. My name is Marissa, and I'm a fourth-year student in the Bachelor of Arts degree. In this presentation, we'll be talking about tips and strategies for critical thinking. Here we go. In today's workshop, we will be exploring the definition of critical thinking. Then we'll talk about the need for critical thought and how to think critically. We will also look at applying critical thinking in action through reading and writing. Before we get started, you should have already printed the Stop, Start, Continue handout, which was posted as a PDF on the home page. If you don't have this printed, please stop the workshop and do so. Restart when you have the sheet in hand and a pen. You need this handout because your task throughout the workshop is to 1. See if you can pick out things that you are currently doing that may be inhibiting your success. These would go in the stop box. 2. You should also be listening for things that you are doing well. These would go in the continue box. And then 3, you need to listen for things that you want to start doing. Try and find at least 2 or 3 of the tips or strategies that I'll present today and put them in the start box. By writing down the behaviors or strategies that you want to change, you are creating a plan for yourself and will already be one step closer to becoming a better student. At the end of the workshop, you'll have time to review what you've put down and think about when you can start implementing these changes. Think about this question for a minute. What does it mean when you're asked to think critically? For me, to think critically is to actively interact with the material, to engage with what I am reading, or to ask questions, and to do research to support arguments and opinions. By definition, thinking critically means to adopt a skeptical or questioning attitude toward the information being presented. And since there is room for disagreement in every academic subject, it is a skill that you definitely need as a university student. That being said, critical thinking isn't about being negative, disapproving, or fault-finding. But it is about being inquisitive and curious about the information presented and not accepting everything you read or are taught as being absolute truths. There are also certain times when it is appropriate to be critical, and times when it's not. Here are some general guidelines. Be critical when you are asked to assess, question, critique, debate, or evaluate. But don't be critical when you are asked to summarize, explain, contrast, or describe. One way that I like to remind myself to be a critical thinker is to pretend like I'm putting on my critical lens glasses, in which I consume information with curiosity. You need to develop critical thinking skills because throughout your university career you will consume large amounts of information, some contradictory, and you will need to decide for yourself which to accept and which to deny as truths to you. Being a critical thinker means that you are an educated consumer of information. While information in itself may be impartial or objective, it is almost never presented in a manner that is either impartial or objective. For example, the way someone chooses to use statistics to either support or oppose policies on death sentence regulation can vary. Just because a person in a position of authority has said something in print, in a lecture, or on the internet, doesn't automatically mean it's true. Keep in mind that just like you, this expert has to use critical thinking to make their decision on what to accept as their own truth. Now that we know what critical thinking is, let's find out how to do it. There are 3 steps in critical thinking. Chances are that you're already at step 2, since you likely have opinions and ideas about certain issues that you've learned in the past, either from high school, friends, family, or the media. Step 1 involves deciding what you think initially and why. In university classes, it is in step 2 where you'll encounter a further challenge, seeking out more evidence and information. Then, step 3 is deciding which view is most reasonable to you and deciding what your opinion or belief is on a specific issue. Critical thinking is expected throughout your university career because you use these skills when writing assignments, in discussion groups, when reading, and even when listening to your instructor lecture. To think critically, you need to interact constantly with the information being presented to you. This means you need to identify the information and carefully evaluate the argument for or against it. This also includes considering the source of the supporting evidence. For example, you may start a psychology course thinking that the Freudian theory of personality is true. But, throughout the course readings and a lecture on personality, you are presented with several other theories on what impacts personality that seem reasonable or even better documented through case studies. After reading about Erikson's views on personality, you may decide that the Oedipal complex in Freud's theory is debatable. In this situation, you've used your critical thinking skills and the end result was a change in opinion. You should note, though, that critical thinking doesn't always lead to a change in opinion. It is also important that you learn to recognize and address your own biases. Critical thinking requires you to go deeper than just using your gut instinct to justify your opinion. You need to be open to new ideas as a critical thinker. Use your critical lens to explore different views and approaches to various topics. The more viewpoints you encounter, the wider and richer your perspective will be. Finally, here are some reminders on critical thinking. Be intentional. Know when to read and when to listen. It helps to develop good questioning skills too. Put in the time. There are no shortcuts when it comes to developing a critical understanding of your subject, material, and sources. Either you have read or listened and thought about an issue, or you haven't. Invest the effort. This is why you are attending university, to become a well-educated, well-rounded person who is ready for the real world. Don't sell yourself short and make the most of the opportunity to learn about others' opinions and theories, even if you don't agree. And last but not least, challenge yourself and realize it's not easy and that critical thinking requires more mental energy. Now that you know what critical thinking entails, we'll take a look at how it applies in reading academic material. Carefully evaluating what you're reading requires more attention and concentration on your part. Often, the things you have to attend to as a critical leader are not on the page. They are implicit, which means that they are assumed but not openly acknowledged. Some things to consider as a critical reader are the context, the author's approach, the strategies for persuasion, the logic and the validity of the supporting evidence. Critical reading involves evaluating the context of the work, which means asking yourself questions like, when was it published? Where was it written? And what is the author's background? Considering when and where the publication was written or published will help you understand the social, economic, and other factors that may influence the information presented. It will also help you identify any influences that may bias the author. For example, a commentary on Marxism written in 1960 in the United States may be entirely different than a commentary on Marxism published in Russia at the same time. Each text would consider the issue through a different lens with different biases. When reading, you should also consider the author's approach. To do this, you can reflect on the following key points. The author's intentions, whether he or she meant to arouse emotion or convince you of a certain position. Is the author's attitude and tone lighthearted, condescending, or ironic? Does the author treat all the issues considered as seriously as they deserve? What are the author's biases and/or assumptions? And finally, what are the implications of the author's argument as a whole? What follows or is implied by the arguments? Some authors may use specific strategies in the way they write, which enables them to incorporate their personalized view. These are strategies of persuasion. The first is language, which is a powerful tool and can sometimes even make the worst argument make sense or seem logical if written in a certain way. That is why you need to be curious and critical in recognizing authors' attempts to persuade you of a particular position. Authors can use a number of tactics, which is why it is important to pay attention to denotative, the thing the word names, and connotative, the thing the name implies. Also, watch for innuendo, up and down labeling, and literal versus figurative speech. Quotes and citations are not a problem in themselves, but they can be quoted out of context or as if there were no room for disagreement. You should also watch for unsubstantiated opinions and generalizations, which are statements presented as accepted opinion when they are not actually so. Appeals, usually to your emotions, can arouse fear, pity, and sympathy. They are all an attempt to persuade you of a particular opinion, rather than demonstrating the logical validity of that opinion through effective logic and presenting facts. If you examine an author's argument and the supporting evidence closely, you may notice that he or she is using faulty logic to arrive at his or her conclusions. Identifying false or misleading information will lead you to discount the author's argument. Some of the things to look out for are the author avoiding a question or ignoring an issue that is central to the topic. You should also watch for an author appealing to your ignorance, assuming that something is true simply because it can't be proven false. Authors may also try to use arguments based on a source in an attempt to discredit an opinion, not by engaging with it, but by attacking its author on a personal basis. And finally, authors may imply untrue relationships that haven't been proven. An argument in which the premise doesn't support the conclusion, usually because it creates a casual relationship when no such relation, in fact, exists. Now that was a lot to digest, so take a moment to refocus. Now, let's look at how to incorporate critical thinking skills into writing. There are many things to consider. First, your paper should be a final product in terms of your critical thinking and reading on the issue. To be a critical writer, you first need to be aware of the argument you are developing. Every sentence written, every paragraph constructed, and every idea has to reflect, relate back to, advance, and support your critical opinion or belief on a topic. Developing a critical insight of your own is perhaps the most difficult, but also the most essential task you face as a writer. It takes practice, time, and effort. You know that a good essay or paper starts with the preparation stage. Here are some ways to incorporate critical thinking into your writing process. The first strategy is to draft a series of "I think this because" statements that will help you to clarify your own ideas and opinions. What you initially believe and why you believe it is an important stepping stone. You can also try to examine and evaluate a variety of viewpoints. Familiarize yourself with and consider the strengths and weaknesses of a range of opinions by various authors. The next strategy is to distinguish what you think from what others think. Organize differing views in terms of how their ideas relate to yours. Which authors pursue arguments that support or contradict or don't even relate to your thesis, and ask yourself how your position might be different. And finally, make sure your argument is your own. While you need to write a thesis in relation to that of others, you also need to maintain your own voice and pursue your own argument. Critical thinking becomes irrelevant if you just passively accept another's view. When it comes to incorporating critical thought into your written work, you want to write it like you think about it or process it. Acknowledge and take into consideration alternative points of view. Whatever you're writing on, you're going to encounter viewpoints and evidence that challenge your thesis. A piece of truly critical writing will acknowledge these points of conflict, respond to them, and logically demonstrate how and why they are not valid. You should also choose your words carefully. Use the words and ideas of others solely to support and develop your own argument. Your critical insight, and not the author's, has to provide your paper with coherence, direction, and structure. Also, strive to apply the same critical standards to your own writing that you do when reading that of others. It's a challenge, but try to approach your own writing as you would someone else's. That means maintaining a sense of self-doubt toward the argument you're developing, keeping an eye out for misleading information and the issues you may have avoided, and also being flexible with respect to your thesis and supporting evidence. Alright, so in summary, today we have covered the definition of critical thinking. We've looked at the need for critical thinking, what is needed to think critically, and how you can use critical thinking in your academic writing and throughout your university career. Now that we've covered the material from the workshop, take a couple of minutes to review what you've put down on your Stop, Start, Continue page. What are the things that you need to stop doing? These are the things that might be hindering your abilities. What are the things that you need to continue doing? These should be the things that you are doing well and are enabling you to reach your full potential. And lastly, what are the things that you want to start doing? These should be the new skills or strategies that you can implement. From these items, I would ask that you take a minute and write down when you are actually going to start doing them. Today? Tomorrow? Remember, the sooner you implement these strategies and skills, the better. I would also encourage you to come into LSS and attend one of our other workshops in person. We offer a wide variety of topics to meet any student's needs. Workshops are available at varying times throughout the week, even including evenings. To see the full schedule, you can use the My Success link on Carleton Central and select LSS workshops. Please note that while you are encouraged to register in advance, it is not required. And, as an added incentive, if you attend 5 or more in-person study skills workshops, you will earn your Skills for Academic Success certificate, which can then be recorded on your co-curricular record. And, if you're looking for more personalized support to develop your study skills, I would like to offer you the opportunity to sign up for a one-on-one study skills appointment. Appointments are 45 minutes long, and you can talk with a study skills specialist about one of the following topics: time management, procrastination, academic reading and note-taking, exam preparation, memory and concentration, listening and note-taking, and learning styles. To schedule an appointment with a study skills specialist, you need to go to the LSS Help Desk on the 4th floor of the McOdrum Library. Finally, If you would like to receive the slides of this workshop, please send an email from your Connect Carleton email account to learningsupport@carleton.ca requesting them. Thank you, and I wish you all the best with your studies here at Carleton.